Hi everyone, this is D Keys, bringing you a build guide for the Dagger Focus Elementalist following the April 15th, 2014 feature patch. Dagger Focus received some great buffs to its utility, with a dodge available on main hand dagger, as well as one more blast finisher. This means that you will have more skills at your disposal to keep yourself alive in those difficult fights, and you have one more blast finisher to keep yourself buffed. However, Dagger Focus also got hit the hardest by the Ferocity update. Staff received the second sigil slot on the weapon, and Scepter builds benefit from the ascended stats that Lightning Hammer as well as other conjures now have. So, while Dagger Focus is still a great build for pugging and for high-level fractals and other challenging content, it is still something that I would not recommend to bring for speedruns and other clears of content where you don't feel like it will be very challenging. But with the changes to runes and sigils in this patch, Dagger Focus Elementalists now have a very solid spot as solo powerhouses able to stack almost 25 might for themselves on their own. The traits that I would recommend for a Dagger Focus Elementalist have not changed at all from before the patch. I would still recommend a 6-6-2-0-0 trait distribution. In Fire, take Burning Precision as your first major trait. This enables your critical hits to apply burning, which pairs very well with your Grandmaster minor trait, Burning Rage, which is a 10% damage modifier against those burning foes. The Master level minor trait, Sunspot, is a small increase to your DPS, as you'll be frequently swapping attunements with the rotations that I recommend for Dagger Focus builds. Your second major trait, Pyromancer's Alacrity, reduces the recharge on your fire weapon skills. This enables you to put down fire fields more frequently and thus use your blast finishers in those fire fields more efficiently. This also pairs very well with a Grandmaster major trait, Persisting Flames, which not only extends the duration of those fire fields, but enables your blast finishers in any fire field to apply fury to yourself and up to 4 nearby allies. Thus you'll be stacking plenty of might and fury for your group. In Air, take Bolt to the Heart as your first major trait. It is a damage modifier that activates when your foe is at low health. The Master level minor trait, Electric Discharge, is a very large increase to your single target DPS. With Fresh Air, which is your Grandmaster major trait in this build, you'll be frequently swapping into air and thus proccing this trait. Since each strike from this trait is about equal to 1 hit from your Lightning Whip, it is a great boost to your damage. For your second major trait, take Air Training, which is a 10% damage modifier while attuned to air, which is the attunement that you will be staying in most frequently with the rotations because the auto attack on Dagger Air attunement has a very good coefficient. Your Grandmaster minor trait, Weak Spot, will enable you to stack vulnerability against foes. For normal monsters, you can expect to stack between 10 and 15 vulnerability, depending on your rotation. And for monsters with Unshakable, you can expect to stack around 4 or 5 vulnerability, which is pretty decent for an Elementalist. The Grandmaster major trait that you take, which is Fresh Air, will enable you to swap to air attunement very frequently. When you land a critical hit, once every 5 seconds, it will recharge air attunement if it is on cooldown. If air attunement is available, then this trait will not activate. In Earth, take Stone Splinters for yet another damage modifier. This one is a 10% damage modifier that is active when you are within 600 range of your target, which should be most of the time because the range on your fire and air auto attacks is 300. If fighting a difficult boss battle, or if you need to practice some mechanics in PvE, you can swap 2 points out of Earth and into Arcana to pick up Renewing Stamina, which will enable you to gain vigor on critical hits. This trait procs every 5 seconds, but grants you 5 seconds of vigor so that you can have 100% vigor uptime. Another tweak to this build, if your party is maintaining 100% burning uptime on your foe, is you can swap Burning Precision for Internal Fire, which is a 10% damage modifier while attuned to fire. This is not a lot of time during your rotations, but it can be a small DPS increase. Other things you could take are Conjurer, which will give more charges to your conjured weapons in case you happen to be using Frostbow, Lightning Hammer, or Fiery Greatsword in a battle. Or you can even take Spellslinger if you're in a boss fight where you'll be slotting cantrips for survivability. With the changes to runes and sigils in this build, there are now a couple of viable options for Dagger Focus Elementalists for their equipment in PvE. The first option that I am experimenting with is an offensive armor set with superior runes of strength. This rune set will give you 175 power, 45% longer might duration, and a 7% damage modifier while you have at least one stack of might, which should be all the time, between the blast finishers and fire fields that you have available. To pair with this armor set and rune set, I would recommend a superior Sigil of Strength on one of your weapons, which will give you 14.5 second long might stacks on critical, well, there is a chance at least, and either a Sigil of Night or a Sigil of Force depending on if you are in a daytime or nighttime instance. The other equipment set that I would recommend for PvE is an offensive armor set with superior runes of the Scholar. This rune set gives you 175 power, 100 ferocity, and a 10% damage modifier while your health is above 90%. If you can maintain your health above this threshold, this is a very powerful modifier to have. To pair with this armor and rune set, I would recommend a Sigil of Force on one weapon, and a Sigil of Night on the other weapon for nighttime dungeons, or a Sigil of Strength instead of Night for daytime dungeons. Other weapons that you could have for either armor set are stacking weapons. In this case, you would want to stack Bloodlust so that you can have a higher power, because the ferocity of this build is relatively low. You do not want to stack more precision. Also, I would recommend a Sigil of Energy on a weapon so that you have more dodges for those very difficult boss battles. And possibly a Sigil of Battle for one of the rotations that I will show you later. Of course, if you run particular dungeons frequently, it's always a good idea to have particular slaying sigils on some of your weapons. For trinkets, use full Berserker's trinkets of the best rarity that you can afford. I recommend precise infusions for Berserkers or mixed armor sets, and power infusions for Assassin's armor sets. Also, remember to put a Sigil of Bloodlust on your Trident so that after you stack up to 25 stacks of Bloodlust, you can swap to another weapon and keep those stacks of Bloodlust. Regarding which attributes you should get on your armor, there is about 0.5% difference in effective power between Assassins, Berserkers, and mixed armor, and 0.3% difference in DPS. So I would recommend getting an armor set that would also be optimal for any other weapons you prefer to run, Assassins for staff builds, or Berserkers for lightning hammer builds. For consumables, I would recommend plates of truffle steak if you are using Berserkers or mixed armor sets, or bowls of curry butternut squash soup if using Assassins. Now the difference is in the Berserkers and mixed armor sets, you have a high power and a low crit damage just from the build, so you don't need to focus on precision as much, and the increase in power is more worthwhile than the increase in ferocity. For the Assassin's Armor set, your precision is already relatively high, so adding to that will enable you to get more use out of the ferocity from this build. The cheaper versions of these foods are plates of steak and asparagus, and Minotaur steaks, respectively. Other foods you may want to think about carrying around are candied dragon rolls, or omnamberry pies or ghosts, which give you lifesteal on crit, and will help you get through some of the more difficult boss fights if you end up taking a little bit of damage. Another food that is useful when clearing large numbers of enemies in waves, say, or in open world PvE, are Dragon's Breath buns, which will give you 200 power for a short time after you kill an enemy, as well as some ferocity. Whenever possible, I would recommend using slaying potions. The 9 or 10% additional damage, as well as the damage reduction, are very helpful, especially in high-level fractals where enemies will hit you hard and nearly one-shot you. When slaying potions are not available, I would recommend sharpening stones for all armor sets with this build, as you'll get more use out of the additional power than the small amount of precision. In some cases, I will use Skull Venom, especially in high-level fractals, so that I can help inflict weakness and vulnerability on my foes. That way, if I am hit by an enemy, there is a greater chance that that hit won't take as much of my health pool. And of course, stacking vulnerability will help the enemies die faster. Other things you may want to think about carrying around are a couple of Harpy Feathers and Ash Legion Spy Kits. This will help you get some difficult skill points that are channels in open world PvE, and can help you in the Dredge Fractal a little bit. I also have a large stack of Fire Elemental powders, and use them occasionally in difficult fights, but the 30-minute cooldown makes them something that I don't think about as much anymore. For skills, I would recommend Arcane Brilliance as your heal. The Blast Finisher is very useful at maintaining that might for the Strength runes, and when fighting enemies, the heal is actually a decent heal. When you don't hit enemies, the heal is only about a third of your health pool, but when you hit up to 5 targets, it can heal up to about 6,000 health. If you would rather not use Arcane Brilliance, or if you need condition removal, I would recommend Ether Renewal. Now, since the skill has a long channel, it is sometimes not a good choice in boss fights when you'll be dodging frequently. In that case, I would recommend Glyph of Elemental Harmony because it is a large and reliable heal. If you feel that you don't need a heal at all and still don't want to take Arcane Brilliance for the Blast Finisher, I would recommend Signet of Restoration. For your other slot skills, I would recommend Signet of Fire for the precision, which will then enable you to get more procs from fresh air, as well as burning precision. Arcane Wave, which again is a blast finisher and will help you proc fresh air and burning precision. And there are a variety of third utilities that I usually swap between. Frostbow is a very good DPS increase for Dagger Focus and brings AoE damage to a build that doesn't have as much of it as some of the Elementalist's other weapon sets. Frostbow 4 is a very large AoE that can damage many enemies at once because each of those ice comets can hit up to 5 enemies. Frostbow 5, Deep Freeze, will enable you to freeze an enemy in place for 5 seconds. Other options, if you would like something more defensive, are Glyph of Storms. When cast in Earth Attunement, the Sandstorm will blind and damage up to 5 foes per tick. And Glyph of Elemental Power is another option that I bring to a lot of boss battles. When cast in Water Attunement, your skills for the next 30 seconds may apply Chilled to an enemy, or when cast in Earth Attunement, your skills would apply Cripple. Now this is very useful when you want to kite around a boss in max melee range so that they can't hit you and so that you can continue DPSing. Now remember that once you cast the skill, the effect is determined. So once you swap out of that attunement, you keep that effect. So you can continue on with your normal DPS rotation once you activate that glyph. For defensive options during boss battles, if I am not using the AoEs or Glyph of Elemental Power, I'll take either Arcane Shield or Mist Form so that I have one more block or way to mitigate damage on my bar. If I need even more condition removal than Ether Renewal and Magnetic Wave, I may take Cleansing Fire. Or if I feel like I'll need to be more mobile in a fight, I'll take Lightning Flash. Sometimes I'll also keep Conjure Lightning Hammer on my bar if I'll need persistent blinds for long fights, such as against waves of cultists in the Cliffside Fractal. In most cases, I'll keep Conjury Fiery Greatsword as my elite, even though it was nerfed so that you can no longer use Lightning Flash with it to blink, rush, and stack up the AoEs of Fiery Rush. When used against a wall, Fiery Rush is still very good damage, and Fiery Whirl and the Firestorm are also good damage. In fights where there aren't walls handy, or when the boss can potentially interrupt my Fiery Rush, I can use Glyph of Elementals for either a DPS gain or for a face tank. The Fire Elemental is an okay gain in AoE damage, while the Air Elemental is better single target DPS. The Earth Elemental has a very high toughness and is very good at grabbing aggro from bosses and champs that have very simple aggro mechanics. The Dagger Focus weapon set has a lot of built-in utility. In Fire, we have two fire fields. The first is on Burning Speed, which is a base 4-second fire field, extended to 6 seconds with Persisting Flames. In the feature patch, this skill was also changed to an evade so that you can use it instead of a dodge in combat. The second fire field is Flamewall, which is a base 8-second fire field, extended to 10 seconds with Persisting Flames. If an enemy stands in either of these fire fields, they will receive damage as well as burning, so if an enemy is standing in it, you'll want to try to keep them standing in it. In Water, we now have two blast finishers. Frozen Burst was changed to a blast finisher in the feature patch, and Comet has been a blast finisher for a while and will daze your target. You can aim Comet without a target by looking either down into the ground or up into the air, wiggling to fix your camera angle, and then casting the skill. The Comet will appear about 300 range in front of you. In Air, we have Swirling Winds, which will destroy projectiles for 6 seconds, and Gale, which is a knockdown. So if you are first encountering an enemy, you can use that to disable them and safely burst them. I also sometimes use Shocking Aura so that if I am hit, this will also disable the attacker. In Earth, there is Magnetic Wave, which is a blast finisher and will remove conditions from you. And finally, Obsidian Flesh is a 4-second invulnerability skill, so that you can either safely drop a Fiery Greatsword or Frostbow, or continue DPSing. The high DPS rotation for Dagger Focus has not changed with this patch, and is still a very good fit for Scholar's Runes and damage modifier sigils. Start at about 300 range away from your target, and cast Flamewall on top of your target. Then immediately follow up with a Burning Speed through your target. While Burning Speed is channeling, swap to Air Attunement so that the blast from Burning Speed can be affected by the 10% damage modifier while in Air Attunement. Then, when in Air Attunement, cast Lightning Whip 4 times, that is for a total of 8 hits, and cast Arcane Wave in a fire field so that you can begin stacking Might and Fury. Travel to the fire field in Flamewall and swap to Earth Attunement during the 4th Lightning Whip so that you can follow up with Arcane Brilliance and Magnetic Wave for 2 more blast finishers in a fire field. Then swap back to Air Attunement and cast Lightning Whip about 7 to 8 times. You'll want to be looking at the cooldown on your Fire Attunement, and then about 2 seconds after Fire Attunement comes off cooldown, swap back to Fire Attunement to begin the second half of your rotation with a Flame Wall on top of your target again, and then a Burning Speed through your target. Again, you'll want to start at about 300 range away from your target with your burning speed so that it will be hit by the blast of burning speed. Then, while burning speed is channeling, again swap to air attunement and then cast lightning whip 4 times. During the 4th lightning whip, swap to water attunement and then follow up with a frozen burst while standing in a fire field, and then comet. While comet is channeling, swap back to air attunement so that it can benefit from the 10% damage modifier from air. Then cast lightning whip 7 to 8 times, again until fire attunement has been off cooldown for 1 or 2 seconds, and then repeat this rotation. This rotation is pretty high DPS and also enables some flexibility in your dodging while in air attunement. However, since it is tied to the cooldown of Flamewall and not the cooldown of your blast finishers, it is relatively low in its might stacking capabilities. You can expect to maintain about 6 to 9 stacks of might while using Scholar's runes, or 9 to 12 stacks of might when using Strength runes. This is not including any extra stacks of might from your sigils. If you happen to use a might providing sigil, I would recommend Sigil of Strength with this rotation. A very experimental rotation that Zelen shared with me uses the fire field from burning speed instead of the one from Flamewall, the stacked might. Start with burning speed through your target, and while the skill is channeling, swap to air attunement to benefit from the damage modifier. Let lightning whip channel 3 complete times and cast arcane wave into the fire field. At the start of the 4th lightning whip, swap to earth attunement and interrupt the channel using arcane brilliance, and then cast magnetic wave. Then swap back to air attunement and cast lightning whip about 7 times, that is, until fire attunement is off cooldown. As soon as fire attunement is off cooldown, swap back to it and use burning speed through your target again. Then swap to air attunement, lightning whip 3 times, and at the start of the 4th lightning whip channel, swap to water attunement. Cast comet and then frozen burst. This way, both blast finishers will hit your fire field. Then swap back to air attunement as soon as possible and cast lightning whip about 7 times again so that fire attunement is off cooldown. Then, when fire attunement is off cooldown, swap back to it and repeat this rotation. While this rotation is relatively easy to perform against golems in Heart of the Mists, I can foresee it being difficult to pull off in real battles. However, since it can maintain about 9 to 12 stacks of might without runes or sigils that help you stack additional might, I would hope that it will inspire you to use your blast finishers more efficiently so that you can maintain a higher might count on you and your group. This is one of the keys to using these new runes of strength most efficiently. A Sigil of Battle works very well with this rotation. However, you won't see the full benefit from the sigil until 20 seconds into a battle. There is a lower DPS rotation that may be more feasible for real combat. Start with a Flamewall under your target, and immediately use burning speed through your target, swapping to air while the skill is channeling. Lightning whip about 2 times and cast arcane wave while in air attunement, and immediately swap to earth and cast arcane brilliance and magnetic wave. Then swap back to air attunement as soon as it's off cooldown. If you have troubles getting back to air attunement, use Ring of Earth. Then, while back in air attunement, lightning whip about 2 more times until you can swap to water attunement. Then cast Comet and Frozen Burst so that both of these blast finishers can land in your fire field. Then, when possible, swap back to air attunement and lightning whip about 15 times. During this time, Flamewall will be coming off cooldown, as well as your blast finishers. When Arcane Brilliance has about 4 seconds left on its cooldown, swap back to fire so that you can repeat this rotation. Since the length of this rotation nearly matches the duration of might with strength runes, you can maintain about 15 stacks of might on yourself and nearby party mates. Add in a Sigil of Battle or preferably Sigil of Strength for this rotation, and you'll be maintaining about 20 stacks of might on yourself, if not 25, while Flamewall is active, so that you can be almost fully buffed for a battle. Remember that Dagger Focus is a weapon set that you should use in difficult fights, and so you'll likely have to tweak these rotations in order to use them in real combat situations. Also, remember to supplement your DPS with Frostbow, Lightning Hammer, and Fiery Greatsword when appropriate. Just because you're traded for Dagger Focus does not mean that you can't use all the other tools that an Elementalist has available. That's it for Dagger Focus for now. Thanks for watching.